a lot of Americans who oppose Ukraine, including people I've met in Congress, it's not because they oppose Ukraine. It's because they know that the mood in America is skeptical of Washington. The Kremlin pushes stories about them in an effort to besmirch Ukraine.
Before we continue, we invite you to follow our channel, the only American show reporting live from Ukraine every day.
Russia has launched a massive attack on Ukraine's energy sector. Let's check in with Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. And Joe, I hope you have some heat where you are at least.
Bob, good afternoon from Kyiv. Yes, I do, but it depends on the neighborhood in the city of Kyiv and throughout the country. And it was indeed one of these major attacks. I've been mentioning a few times the past few days that there was this growing sense of unease throughout Ukraine because there had not been such a major attack. Really from throughout the fall, September, October, and into November, there were, Russians had really increased the number of attacks. And for example, here in Kyiv, there were some weeks where it was drone attacks almost every night. And the past several weeks, there has been an eerie calm here. And so I was mentioning to you, everyone is saying, okay, what's going on? Is this because of geopolitical events? Is Russia saving up to launch a major attack? And indeed, that's what they were doing. We had the report right about midnight last night that Russian bombers were taking off deep within the Russian Federation. So that means that an attack is likely being prepared. Typically the bombers move toward the Caspian Sea, and that is their launch point. And from about 6 o'clock this morning, the attack began. And for example, here in Kyiv, many people dragged themselves to the subway stations, to the metro stations, bringing their families and their pets to go deep underground, just in case the city was hit. In the end, the cities were not hit directly in the way that they often have been. So this attack was concentrated on energy infrastructure, power stations, in sort of in the countryside, in between the cities. But hitting some of the most, as we know, what the Russians have been trying to target and have been targeting for a while, the key elements of Ukrainian infrastructure. So it was another big blow. We don't quite know the full extent of the damage, and there are widespread power outages. And here in Kyiv, you hear that deafening, maddening sound of the generators everywhere, which can start to drive you a little bit crazy, especially for people that haven't slept because of such an attack. So despite all that, it was calm. It was calm here in Kyiv, and it looks nice. It's all covered in snow, but underneath is a much harsher reality.
Yeah, the reports mention here that streets in Kyiv, the capital, remained largely empty Friday morning as Ukraine's Air Force warned of the threat of ballistic and cruise missiles potentially targeting parts of the country. Are you hearing the sirens, the alerts?
Yeah, well, no, I didn't. Sometimes you just choose to sleep through it. But we knew this attack was coming, and you never know, of course, how it's going to shake out. You can't get a proper forecast of it, and so there was a foreboding that the cities would be hit, because I would say maybe going back to say last summer, people sort of stopped going into the subway shelters, but because it's been so long since a major attack, that increases the anxiety level, and so people decide to stay home or to go into the subways.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on, and you see a lot of this is a psychological game. I mean, so for example, today Kyiv City was safe, but now you have the entire city underslept. You still get up and go to work, and as I've mentioned before, there's no snow days when there are missile attacks. Everyone has to go to school and work, and so it's it's another part of the warfare. And I guess speaking of the psychological tricks and the difficulties of this, I have a piece was published yesterday in the Spectator magazine, which is that's a magazine in the UK. They also have an American edition, the oldest magazine in the world. And in this story, I'm addressing one of the trickiest problems for Ukraine, and it's a very smart trick of Russian propaganda. When I talk with or when I listen to American podcasts, like the reasons why the Americans who don't support Ukraine, there tends to be a few very simple and clear answers. They're not arguments. Usually just they list people's names. They say Hunter Biden. They say Victoria Nuland. They say the Vindman twins. Even if you listen to Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, often their opposition to Ukraine is based on those names. And I have paying attention to this. I say, well, why is that the case? And I realize that a lot of Americans who oppose Ukraine, including people I've met in Congress, it's not because they oppose Ukraine. It's because they know that the mood in America is skeptical of Washington. And there are these people I mentioned in the story. The Kremlin pushes stories about them in an effort to besmirch Ukraine. And the Kremlin knows exactly what they're doing here. I mean, Putin was a KGB agent, and all that sort of apparatus still exists. And as you'll see, if you look at the story, it's a tricky thing because the right wing, so to speak, I don't like to mention those words left and right, but the right wing in the U.S. That opposes Ukraine, they use these individuals that have some kind of connection to Ukraine, seemingly. Like, for example, Victoria Nuland was the State Department official. There are photographs of her at Ukraine's 2014 revolution giving people cookies, as we talked about. Hunter Biden works for that energy company, Burisma. The Vindman twins were the ones who exposed Trump's phone call with Zelensky. And so they all have some little seeming connection to Ukraine. And so for the right-wing opposition to Ukraine, that's enough to say that they don't want to support Ukraine. But if you try to actually dig deep and investigate, are these people really connected to Ukraine? Is Ukraine's cause really tied up with these names? As soon as you start to investigate that, you end up angering the left-wing supporters for Ukraine. Because, for example, Victoria Nuland, longtime State Department official, or the Vindman twins ostensibly support Ukraine. And so the Russians know that this is a tricky mess that it's almost impossible to investigate. And then and no one can actually talk about it. And so what that does is it creates a space for the Kremlin to push this propaganda to reach Americans who they know are sick of Washington. And so what I attempt to do in this story is to try to diffuse the situation. And I make the point that if, for example, the people I mentioned in the story were to say, hey, look, I'm not, the cause of Ukraine has nothing to do with me. For example, Hunter Biden, that the company Burisma that he worked with, the CEO of Burisma is an opponent of Ukraine's 2014 revolution. He was part of the government that Ukrainians kicked out of their country. He fled to Moscow, and only when he was in Moscow did he hire Hunter Biden. So to call Burisma a Ukrainian company, which everyone does, BBC, Reuters, everyone, is completely false. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I know I'm sort of touching a third rail in that story, but I think if that doesn't get addressed, it's going to be a real problem for Ukraine when it comes to the team around Donald Trump, because a lot of them believe these false claims.
It's important to read your view, and then we can make up our own minds, and we can post a link to your article at WGNradio.com. And then if you disagree with Joe's position, text us or email us. And Joe, I'll read the other side to you on Monday.
Yeah, I welcome all criticism. Good, and because I think it's a topic that no one is talking about. So I'm trying to open the conversation.
Yeah, good for you. Thanks. And we will get together Monday.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important, that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?